Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks, our MMA podcast, and I believe this is episode 5. Pretty sure it's episode 5, and we've done it. We have gotten through the UFC Apex cards that are not that great, that really don't give us much to talk about, and here we are with a pay-per-view card, and this is about as good of a pay-per-view as we've seen in a very long period of time, and I'm pumped for this weekend. What are you guys' overall thoughts on this card and the fact that we are through the Apex events with the pay-per-view? Anthony, we'll swing it over to you.
Um, yeah, I think this is finally, which I know there's always that like 3 or 4 week break from December to January and stuff. But this is the first time like it's like super exciting that it's a pay-per-view event. And it's one of the things where when they finally do it right and try the hardest and build a card and make a great pay-per-view, it is so much more fun. It's like the one where you want to tell your friends to watch and more people in general want to watch. So yeah, it's overall just exciting that it's finally some good card, not no really real misses or and then on top of that, it's not just one good fight. There's at least you can even just say the last three should all be super fun fights.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean, this card is going to be so much fun. I was just counting it out, 15 or 13 ranked fighters across the whole card. So that's something we don't see a lot of. Even the prelims, not as exciting as say 299 or 300 upcoming, but hey, those two are special cards. But just happy to be back with a crowd. That's probably what I'm looking forward to the most. Anaheim, they've had some good fights in the past at the Honda Center, whatever it was called beforehand. So this should be another one. And main card, just banger after banger after banger, all the way through Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria.
Yeah, and I think this is a big upgrade from 297, the last event in Canada. Not only in card depth, I think we're 5 for 5 on these main card fights being interesting. I think 4 of these fights are absolute home runs of matchmaking, and the depth as well is great. The main event is about as good of a fight as you can make. So I'm thrilled, and I think we have a great card here. And I think it is only fitting to start right at the top at the main event. We have Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. This is, in my opinion, a great fight. So to start it off, I just want to gauge where you guys are at with this fight. How excited are you? Where does this fight kind of stack up in terms of excitement level? Jerry, we'll throw it over to you first.
I mean, this is the fight we've kind of been waiting for quite a while now. Obviously, Volk stepped in on short notice to fight Islam. Otherwise, this was the fight that was looking like he was going to be taking next. So Topuria is a monster, which is scary, but at the same time, and this might be controversial. I've seen people saying, and others all that talk about Topuria and how he's going to run over him and how Volk's the 35-year-old and he's going to lose as the old guy. But Topuria didn't beat one guy that stands out to me in this division. He didn't beat Max Holloway. He also didn't beat Yair Rodriguez, the recent interim champion. His big wins are Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett. Yes, good wins, but he went to a decision against Josh Emmett. Did get the submission against Bryce Mitchell, which was pretty surprising because Mitchell's definitely more of a grappler. But just in terms of the excitement for this one, I don't know where I'm going with it, but I'm not concerned about Topuria as much as he thinks he's the one to go for ahead. Says it's written in the stars that he's 15-0 on Instagram. He's already the champion. You can't look past anybody, and you definitely can't look past a guy named Alexander Volkanovski that has been so good across this division forever. His only 2 losses in recent times were both to Islam. I think we've discussed before that Islam might never lose in the lightweight division. The way it's going, he is one of those really, really talented fighters. And we got us a banger coming up on Saturday night.
Exactly. I agree. I think this is for excitement level, I mean, this is the best fight you could make at that division, and we're finally going to get it. And then, yeah, kind of like you said, because Topuria just seems scary. I know the resume right now, but to be fair. I feel like he's done everything he's needed to do in the fights to lead up to this. Because the other one would have been, yes, just that Max. But of course, any fight, Max and Topuria besides Volk might be the other matchup to make that I think would be the best one you could make. But I'm overall excited, and overall, I kind of have not really picked one yet. I could see it going either way because it's hard. Am I looking at the Volk before he left featherweight that was just untouchable, or do I got to think of it as someone that just lost his last two, give or take, he went up? So there's also that air, or there's that aura of like, what Volk are we going to maybe see against Topuria?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Anthony, you said this is one of the best fights that can make in their division. I think this is one of the best fights that you can make in the UFC. Period. I really struggle to see fights that are better than this. 145 also possibly my favorite division from both a skill aspect and an entertainment aspect. I think this division is one of the best in the sport. Top 3 minimal probably, and I think this is one of the best fights in one of the best divisions. So I think this is a great fight. I think really highly of both of these guys. I've been impressed by Topuria. I was a little slow to get on the Topuria hype train. I wasn't all the way bought in when he fought Bryce Mitchell. I wasn't all the way bought in when he fought Josh Emmett. I thought he'd beat Josh Emmett, but I didn't think he was going to go out there and dismantle him and win all 5 rounds cleanly and beat him up badly. So I've been a little bit behind the hype train here, but I do think, in my opinion, from I went through and rewatched a little bit, and I think it's probably safe to say that he is a top 3 guy in this division alongside Max and Volk. And I think this is a very interesting fight because skills, this is interesting, but also you have Volkanovski, who's one of the best fighters of all time. Top 10 probably. I don't have a list written down of where I think everybody in history stands, but it's definitely one of the best in recent memory. Then you have Topuria, a fast rising prospect who looks really, really good, and seems to be catching Volk at the right time. So I think this is very, very interesting. And then looking at the fight itself, what are some things that you guys are looking forward to in this, or what are some things that you're looking at skills wise that could give an edge to either one of these fighters? Anthony, we can throw it over to you this time.
Okay, so like I said, or kind of like you put it up too, before we get straight into like the infight, I've never been big on the whole. I know there's a certain cliffs that people fall off when they reach certain ages, and I know Volk's getting up there. And so why I'm struggling going back to is I usually miss it late. I'll usually ride with the dude that's been doing it for however long, proven that he's the champion and undeniable. And so that's why I always kind of miss that first slip up when one of the newcomers gets it. But I have actually been a big Topuria fan for a decent amount of fights now, and I just think his talent is insane. And I think I also love complete fighters, and I think he's great everywhere in a sense. So, but the other thing is, so is Volk. So he showed he can wrestle multiple times, also beating multiple specialists such as Topuria, that is beating Ryan Hall and Bryce Mitchell with the huge grappling and jiu-jitsu and stuff. So I don't know. Here's the other thing. I'm trying to pick up the game plan too. I guess he did fight Yair, but it's tough when Volk's last, because that's the one things I think that stood him apart in those Max Holloway fights, where he would find some success in the first fight, find some weaknesses, come into the second fight with a different type of game plan that improved on that and then also helped his weaknesses. And since he's prepared for Islam the last 2 fights, I just don't quite know what the game plan could be, because honestly, I believe in Topuria's striking a little bit to be competitive and catch Volk, to where I don't think Volk can quite offensively wrestle against Topuria like he was able to against Max at points, or at least always have Max worrying about the takedowns or winning a round even by getting that takedown. And I just don't know if I see that in his back pocket to be a true path to success against Topuria.
Yeah, I'm honestly with you there a little bit. Topuria is one of the, if not probably the most well-rounded fighter Volkanovski's had to fight, take away Islam Makhachev. So it's one of those things that he has to defend the takedowns. Volk does. But with that being said, he got taken down against Brian Ortega in that fight in that third round. Very close to being submitted twice. He just finds ways to get it out of there. Because even against Islam, he was on the ground at times. He was getting dominated, but he still found a way to escape, found a way to get back up. He was only put down because he was head kicked and knocked out in that second fight. It wasn't like he was submitted. So that's maybe something I'm a little more concerned about, is Topuria does have the power on the feet as well at times. That might be where he needs to keep the fight more so than on the ground, because Volkanovski has shown such good defensive wrestling and grappling that this is something that maybe Topuria is a little concerned about. Sure, he has 8 submission wins. He also has 4 knockouts. So there's that aspect. And I think the fact that Volkanovski fought Islam in 2 of his last 3 helps him on the wrestling side of things, because he has fought probably the best wrestler currently in the 155 division. So I think it's going to be interesting. I do still think Volkanovski gets it done on the feet. He's proven time and time again that he can't be kept or can't be knocked out on and looked at, or not knocked out. Blanking on the word. We'll
Knocked out, or
no,
I mean, he's been stunned.
Yeah, he's been stunned, but apart from the Islam one at 145, he's just hasn't really looked in that much danger of being finished recently at all. So it's kind of one of those things I'm like, I need to see something from Topuria that really sets him apart. And I'm not sure if Topuria is the guy to do that yet.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on the skill things of this fight. Usually I honestly probably dig too deep into skills sometimes. One thing I will like to quickly take a victory lap on is in the Alexander Volkanovski film study. One of the things I pointed out was that he's not good at defending head kicks. And I talked about how he only uses his hand and really doesn't show them much respect. And I said, you know, if you aim it at the temple and higher, he can land head kicks. And then Makhachev went out there, landed the head kick. So I'm going to take my victory lap on that. But that said, in this matchup, Ilia Topuria, a lot of great striking skills, but he really doesn't kick much, and almost none of his kicks are above the belt. He'll throw leg kicks, but I don't see a head kick coming for Topuria today, or on Saturday, excuse me. But in this matchup, I think the grappling is going to cancel out. I think both these guys are really, really good grapplers, and I don't think either one is going to have enough of an edge to go out there and out grapple the other. We've seen them both defeat really impressive grapplers. I think they're both great grapplers themselves, so I think we're going to cancel out in that regard. But one thing I do think is interesting is that Ilia Topuria is a very unique. It's a guy, I shouldn't say unique because it's really not unique, but it's a type of fighter that Volkanovski has not fought in a long period of time. He's a short boxer that hits really hard and can grapple. The last time that he fought someone like that, you'd probably have to go back to Aldo or Mendez. If you look at Holloway, he's a much longer guy that does not hit hard. If you look at Yair, longer guy, really doesn't have as much boxing, great kicks. If you look at Ortega, he is a grappler that really doesn't have much offensive striking. So this is really a style of fighter that Topuria has not seen that Volkanovski has not seen in a significant period of time. And I think that is very important to note. And I think that can be what causes him issues here, because I think we're going to see a lot of boxing in the pocket. I think, these two guys are two great boxers, and I think that's where a large portion of this fight is going to take place. Um, that said, Volkanovski, maybe he mixes it up and looks to hit kick range a little more. Maybe he looks to get in the clinch, because I don't necessarily think he gets takedowns, but maybe he can go out there, get in the clinch, and land elbows. Very physical guy in the clinch, underrated clinch striking. So maybe that's an aspect he finds success. But I think this is a very close matchup. I think it's going to come down to strength versus strength. Both great boxers, great jab, a lot of power, great counters. Both press fighters very well. But one thing that really stands out to me is that Volkanovski likes to come forward and throw long combinations where he's moving forward. Had a lot of success with that because he can switch stances, throw power with both hands. But Topuria is great at moving backwards and landing counters. And I think he's going to land some really solid counters. And I do slightly lean Topuria, but Volkanovski wins. I'm not overly shocked at all.
I guess just one other thing on that skills aspect that I'm thinking of that might be something that Volkanovski could use to his advantage is the leg kicks. He has used leg kicks in the past, and this is something that if he's pushing forward, there's only so much Topuria can do to step back and evade those leg kicks. So it's something that might be just something I have in the back of my mind to keep an eye on.
I agree with that. I think if we see Volkanovski kick the leg heavy early in this fight, I think it swings a lot more in his favor if he's landing that leg kick hard.
I do think my one last thing was going to be kind of just the way this fight's set up is like the new shining star up and comer, undefeated versus Volk, someone that's been there, has his hand raised multiple times, multiple defenses. Is I can't think so far in the last 4 or 5 fights that I've watched at Topuria where he himself has also been close to getting finished or really in the deep waters. That Volk has seen multiple times now with 5-round fights with Max, first 5-round fight with Islam, and then like we were talking earlier, getting out of that guillotine was the bad one, but then also got put in a triangle in that Ortega fight as well, right? Not as locked in, but that's the other thing is we'll see what round 4 and 5 Topuria in a in a slugfest looks like. And if he still, oozes the same confidence that he seems to have right now. But there's a difference when it's round 4, round 5, and you're facing off against one of the all-time greats that's still gonna, go after you, still gonna put together his combos. It seems like he's not getting tired either. So I'll be curious to see how that works, those championship rounds.
Yeah, and then a couple other things that I want to address that really scare me in this fight if I'm a Volkanovski fan, is that he got knocked out 4 months ago. This is like a very quick turnaround to what, in my opinion, was a very brutal knockout. The head kick didn't put him out stone cold like Leon Edwards, but like Leon Edwards did to Usman. But when you're looking at the follow-up shots afterwards, he got dropped and then he was out cold and ate 3 or 4 shots from, a mounted ground and pound position that looked pretty brutal. His head was bouncing around pretty badly. And he came out and said that this fight was going to be in January, but they pretty much forced him to push it back an extra month because of the knockout. So I think that is worth noting that, hey, this fight, this is like the earliest that he could possibly fight after that knockout loss. And then I have 2 stats regarding the main event that I find interesting. One, fighters that are over the age of 35 in championship fights between 125 and 170, they are 2 and 21. And I think that is, I don't think it's a curse. I think it's a stat. Maybe he breaks that stat, but we've seen guys fall off at this point with age. And on top of that, fighters that are, so Volkanovski currently has 5 title defenses. Fighters going for their 6th are 7 and 6. So this really isn't. This is kind of a number that a lot of guys get tripped on. Izzy, Usman, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, all lost going for the 6th title defense. And that's another stat that I found really interesting. So
Numbers don't lie.
yeah, maybe it's coincidence, but this is like a spot where historically we have 2 things coming forward that says a lot of champs trip up at this period of time. And I know 7 people won when they were at this point, but it's all great fighters. So you're looking at guys like DJ, Silva, GSP, John Jones. Maybe he joins that tier. Ronda Rousey. So, but we've seen Kamaru Usman lost to Leon Edwards going for the 6th defense, and it was his first fight after he turned 35. So I do think that is maybe I take a lot more into that than others, but I do think it is worth noting. And I do think that Topuria will have a power and durability advantage in a fight that's going to be a close boxing match. So 2 things that really swing me towards Topuria. So kind of a long rant there on stats, but that is my final prediction here is Topuria because he is the younger guy who has more power and is more durable. So that's the way I'm going in the main event.
You had told me that first stat before, but I didn't know that sixth defense one. But that's what I was also saying earlier. I always go with the older guy too long to always stay on the throne, stay on the top of the mountain. And this is one where I'm finally trying to tell myself, especially since I like what I've seen from the younger guy, maybe we'll give it a chance. Maybe we'll try to pick the upset before it happens.
Yeah, I will. I've tripped upon that 7 and 6 stat. Going for the 6th title defense because I was looking just because I was writing the preview and I was like, well, I'd like to know how many title defenses Volk has, because it's getting to the point where pretty legendary in terms of consecutive title defenses. And I realized I was like, we got a lot of people who stopped at 5, and come to find out it's not a great number for people going for that 6th defense. So just an interesting thing. Maybe it means nothing, but I found it interesting. So.
I do have one question for you guys. Looking ahead and say, because odds are very close. I'm not surprised right now with the UFC showing -112 for Volk to -108 for Topuria. But Topuria, if he does get it done, are you surprised? And did you see last week that he said something along the lines of he won't be giving any one of Yair, Max, Volk another title shot? And it's more pretty much this is his division and he's running with all the new guys? Because that surprised me to see.
Well, first off, he'll know that it's not his choice, and Dana can do whatever he wants.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's ideal for him, I guess, but I don't see it really working like that. Especially, we'll see what happens with Max. I think Volk can get his rematch if he really wants it. He deserves it too. He's also just filled in like that. He didn't have to do that to fill in for the Islam fight, so that's already a company guy move in that sense. And then if Max keeps beating people, I don't think anyone's ever going to turn down a Max title fight against someone that's not Volk. So, and then the newcomers have to win more too if he wants to fight new blood.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think it would be incredibly stupid not to fight Max Holloway if that offer comes across the table. Maybe it never comes across the table. Maybe Max stays at 155 for the rest of his career, but Max, the biggest name out of anyone he can fight at 145 pounds, not named Alexander Volkanovski, and it adds the most to your legacy if you win. So I think that would be incredibly a very, very stupid decision on his part. I think he beats Yair pretty cleanly, to be honest. Just like I said earlier, him and Volkanovski have a lot of similarities. Volkanovski went out there, took him down. So I think it'd be silly to not want to fight that guy, considering you have proven concept that your style can give him serious issues. So I think that'd be silly. But, if he wants to, start fighting Movsar Evloev and Arnold Allen, say those guys get, one more win, and, Allen, I guess, is a little further away. But there's some exciting 145ers in this division that could probably make for good fights. So wouldn't be the end of the world, but I don't necessarily think it happens. All right. The co-main event of the evening. This is another great fight. And I posed this question to Jerry before we got started, and I want to pose it again. Is this one of the weirdest fights of all time? Where are these guys at in their careers? Maybe weird is the wrong word, but Robert Whittaker, for the first time in his career, lost to someone, or not first time in his career, first time in a very long time, lost to someone not named Israel Adesanya. Got knocked out for the first time in a very long time. We simply have not seen Whittaker in this position in a long period of time. Is he still an elite guy? Is he sliding back? We don't know. Paulo Costa, last fight, Luke Rockhold in Salt Lake City. How much did Salt Lake City affect him there? That was a weird fight. Go back one more fight. Now you're talking a fight against Marvin Vettori at 205 pounds, where he refused to cut weight. Why did that help him in the fight? Did that hurt him? Was he unprepared? Was he prepared and just didn't want to cut weight? How did that affect him? Then you've got the Izzy fight, which seems like forever ago, but it's only 3 fights back for Paulo. You go back one more, you got the war against Yoel Romero. So I don't know what Paulo Costa or Robert Whittaker is at this stages of their career. What do you guys make of these guys? And am I wrong here that we're kind of in an interesting spot where two guys are kind of in flux? Anthony, we can start it off with you.
No, I mean, I agree. I hope as someone like Robert Whittaker, probably in my top 3 favorite fighters, especially he probably is my favorite fighter of someone that's not from SAC, like California, or like trains Team Alpha Male, or that's not Mexican too. Those are like the 3 things that I always root for. So he's outside of all those things. It might be my favorite fighter. And I think he just looked bad to me. His last fight, it was like one of those nights where, sometimes they just say we don't have it. Wasn't a good day in the office. And that's what I kind of gathered from it, not to take away from the fact that I thought DDP, did everything he needed to do and looked good. But I know he's been getting older, and like you just talked about, he got knocked out, which is never what you want to see from someone that is getting older. So I am worried in that level. And then Paulo, he's still a name that I get scared of, or I think has a lot of, like, if he's fighting one of the fighters I like, that I get scared of, because I do still see him as just, he's a behemoth and he has all that knockout power and stuff. But his track record over his last couple of fights is just every fight does seem weird, whether it's him not wanting to cut weight. I do put a lot of stuff into the fact that was at Salt Lake. However, you would think someone even at Salt Lake that's supposed to be a top 3, top 5 guy would still get a finish against Luke Rockhold. So that's one thing. But overall, I think there is a lot of interesting things tied to this fight, because there's a bit of unknown amongst both fighters. However, it should play out. I see it as Whittaker is the better fighter, and I still think he has a title push left in him. Therefore, the better fighter should win this fight.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, at least at the end. Definitely at the end there, I do think Whittaker is the better fighter still. But the last time we saw him lose, like you said, James, it's been a long time. 2014, he lost to Wonderboy Thompson, and that was the second of 2 fights that he lost. He lost to Court McGee via decision first. So maybe we're seeing him lose 2 straight again this time, which would be unlike the Robert Whittaker that we've seen for such a long time that it kind of is weird for me to say. But this is such I want to say random fight, but it's not random. Both the guys are at the towards the top of the division, but it's one that I feel like we've missed by a year, 2 years, because obviously they did have this one agreed on apparently, or it was close to agreement for 284, I want to say. Yeah, it was 284 in February last year, so virtually a year ago. This was a fight that was supposed to be made for that card. Costa didn't want it, and that still brings up my biggest question. As I mentioned to James beforehand, is Costa gonna make weight first of all, or is something else crazy gonna happen in the fight week leading up? Because it always seems to do. Whether it was the Vettori fight where he refused to cut weight, the Hamzat fight where he had to pull out on short notice, it seems like there's always something going on since that Izzy fight. Izzy might have broken him, honestly. It's one of those weird things that you don't know what's going to happen after your first loss, and he hasn't exactly bounced back in a great way. So it's concerning, but at the same time, he's still such a power puncher and such a dangerous guy on the feet that could definitely put out Whittaker's lights, as we saw Duplessis do. Whittaker looked old in that fight. I will say that was the first fight that he really looked like the age was catching him and that the younger generation was kind of coming up on him. I do agree with you, Anthony, that I still think Whittaker has another shot at a run, but it's off to a tough start here.
Yeah. I hope we live in a world where these two guys just come out and look like they're in their absolute prime and we get a scrap.
Yeah.
I hope that's the world we live in, because if that holds true, I think we get an all-time banger on our hands. Look at both these guys' fights against Yoel Romero. I will say I once again did tape for this fight, and it's not hard to open up the computer and watch these guys fight Yoel Romero. It's a whole lot of fun to do, even if you're trying to do a little bit of studying. But I actually don't think Whittaker looked that bad against Duplessis. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I think he looked better than a lot of people like to give him credit for. But I do think the durability was more of a concern than the overall fight itself. And the physicality was a concern when he got thrown in that hip toss and then Duplessis landed some ground and pound. That was not a great sign either. And then I look at this fight and I go, well, Paulo Costa, in theory, he could come out and, land big shots and really do damage and really test that durability. But at the same time, also what he could do is he's a more physical guy. If there's any grappling, Paulo throws hard ground and pound and it might really be effective there. He can generate a lot of power with some really short shots, even defending takedowns. So a lot of things here that could give Robert trouble. But at the same time, it's like, well, Izzy beat Paulo by kicking him in the leg and circling and not sitting in the pocket. The first time that Paulo Costa ran into someone that was not willing to sit in the pocket and trade with him, he had a lot of problems. So, I don't see a reason why Robert Whittaker can't, jump in with his jab, jump out, and just really do, because he can play that game where he's going to stick and move. He moves very well, great footwork. So I could see a world where he goes out there and picks Paulo Costa apart like he did to Marvin Vettori, walks out with the 30-27. Robert Whittaker's back. That said, one mistake against Paulo Costa, and we're having a very different discussion. So I could see both guys winning this fight. I think it's a very competitive fight. Both guys could show up in different form. Maybe one guy comes in top form, the other guy doesn't. A lot of ifs and buts, but I do think this is a winnable fight for Rob if you're just looking at styles.
I guess that's what threw me off too. Give or take, I am such a fan. Was Whittaker was on such a run, even though he lost that second Adesanya fight, super close too. So that was still a great showing in itself. And he was on such a run of doing like what you just said. I think he's the 30-27 king to everyone in that division with Vettori, Gastelum, Cannonier, and there was Till before that. Like, what a run. And that was my thing of what shocked me. Maybe that he didn't look bad, but it was the durability. Because one, he's usually good. He's good at not getting touched by a lot of those fighters in that division, not named Adesanya. And if he does, he's good at eating it. But he usually won't get hit good a second or third time in that fight. And that's why he got stung by that punch. And you could tell it really affected him. And then he got hit, one or two more times a little bit too. So, which I was, just wasn't prepared for. But I think the same thing against Paulo Costa, maybe not as much of a firefight as he did against the Yoel, but more with the Vettoris and stuff. It's the fight where the game plan's been laid out, and not even the game plan's been laid out for him, but he's already executed that game plan against other fighters of similar styles. So it should overall, that's what overall I would still take Whittaker. And like you said, I think he gets back to that jump in, jump out, getting that free flowing, looking quick, and building off of everything. And I don't know. He's like you said, decision king. I don't know. It sucks because I don't know if he can finish him. Like, obviously he can, but most likely it's going to be a decision. And then just even third round, Costa is still a little bit scary when someone has that much power.
Oh yeah. I mean, like what you were saying, decision king. There's a reason he has stayed as the number one contender in the middleweight division for so long, up until the recent fight against Duplessis. It's because he finds ways to win against everybody but Israel Adesanya. They come up, he knocks them down. If they have a good fight and wins against someone else after, maybe they get the shot at Izzy. He is the benchmark, similar to how Max Holloway is the benchmark for all contenders in the featherweight division. I'm excited for this fight. I do really hope, like you were saying, James, they come out and just say, screw it. We're having us a Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje-esque fight of guys just throwing the hands for 15 minutes. I'm not sure if that benefits Matt or benefits Bobby Knuckles at all, but I do think he gets the win, and I think it'll be a decision win one way or another.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like we're all in agreement here. Bobby Knuckles by decision, but it sounds like all of us are very understanding that Paulo Costa can win this fight. And I think that makes a lot of sense considering where these guys are at. And this is also a fight that kind of has a lot of stakes riding on it. The guy that wins this fight, I don't think it's crazy to say they should fight Sean Strickland. And if you beat Sean Strickland, where are you at? The guy that loses this fight,
Khamzat Chimaev. That's my shout.
Khamzat, not a bad name either in a number one contender fight. Either way,
I'm saying for the loser of this fight.
Oh, for the loser. Okay, I could see that. But either way, you don't want to be the loser of this fight.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I could see that too for being perfect name for them to put Chimaev on. Like, oh, look at who. But yeah, that'd be super tough to lose this fight and then have to fight Chimaev.
Yeah.
You're basically, and then I think I just looked up. Costa was 32, Rob was 33. It's probably no title after that if a loss here.
Mm-hmm. Robert has a lot of miles on the tires too. I think Paulo has a better chance of getting back, but also Bobby is more proven of being able to get to the championship level than Paulo. So a lot of moving parts, but the guy that loses this fight probably not in a great spot. All right. Next fight on the card, we have Ian Machado Garry taking a decent step up in competition to take on Geoff, Hands of Steel, Neal. This is a fight that I think it's fair to say we have campaigned for. I don't really like speaking for all of us at the same time. But in the past, we all very much liked this fight when it was booked the first time and wanted it to be rebooked after the Neal Magny fight, if I remember correctly. So now that this fight is here, what do you guys make of this fight from a competition standpoint? Are you excited? Do you think there's a good step up in competition for Ian Machado Garry? What do you make of this fight? And I believe it is Jerry. I believe it is your turn to lead us off.
Like you said, yes, this is one we've been talking about for what feels like the last year since Ian Garry's win, probably over Daniel Rodriguez. We're like, this is the fight we want to see. Him and Geoff Neal. We'll see how it goes because Geoff Neal can give him something on the ground that he hasn't seen before. Sure, he doesn't have the most submission wins, but he actually can take you and work on you there. I'm curious to see how, obviously, Ian Garry does in this. I'm more curious to see, this is the first fight we've had of Ian Garry since all the stuff happened with his wife, all that, yada, yada, yada. So I wonder where his head's going to be at because he did pull out of that fight that he was scheduled for against Vicente Luque at 296. I'm wondering, sure, that was only 2 months ago, but depending on how serious that sickness was, are there still some lingering effects at all in it? And Geoff Neal is called the Hands of Steel for a reason. You can't sleep at all against him. 9 knockouts. It's going to be one to watch for sure, but I'm curious to see because it's been a long time since Geoff Neal's fought as well. So there's as much question about Ian Garry as there is for Geoff Neal. His last fight was March of 2023, and he fought Shavkat Rakhmonov and was submitted in the last minute of the round of the fight. This one is going to be interesting, but I am kind of leaning towards Ian Garry to get it done. I think they do kind of want him to keep that hype going, the Irishness going, but it's one of those things that you cannot count out Geoff Neal for half a second, because if you do, that's when he smacks you about and you're on the floor.
Yeah, I think for is this the right step up? I think this is a great step up. Like this is, they booked it for a reason the first time, or there's a reason they rebooked it, I should say, because it was just truly that was a good pick. It's just a great fight, great decision that they made for a step up. A bit of hype too, yeah. If win or lose, and I think I enjoy watching Geoff Neal fight a lot. I think he has just a lot of entertaining fights, just his style and everything. And then there was the pretty big layoff, like you said, but I actually, for as much as I think Shavkat is, really him, I thought Geoff Neal did a great, put out a great display of showing he can hang with a fighter. I think I can't remember the round by round breakdown. I assuming he was losing that fight and then got finished in the last minute. But he was definitely showing that he deserved to at least be in that octagon with him. He is that capable. He's capable of that level of fighting. So I think overall matchmaking wise, this is a great one. And then there is, I could see some opportunities for both fighters in this fight, which also makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think this is a great step up in competition because just from if you look at the division, if you go any higher, you're in there with Wonder Boy, and I don't hate the Wonder Boy fight at all, but you go higher than that, now you're Burns, now you're in your Covingtons, now you're in that level, and I feel like you need a win prior to getting in that portion of the division. And frankly, if you can't beat Geoff Neal, I don't really like your chances against some of those guys that are ranked higher. Obviously, different stylistic matchups. Some things would benefit him, other things would not. But you need to be able to beat Geoff Neal if you want to be a championship level fighter, and that is what he is aspiring to be. But on top of that, from a pure entertainment standpoint, you guys already touched on it. It's a great fight. Geoff Neal has looked good recently. His hands are impressive. Hands of Steel earned that nickname, right? He beat up Vicente Luque so badly that Vicente Luque got a brain hemorrhage. And that's kind of the harsh reality of fighting. He beat up Luque bad. Beat up Bilal Muhammad bad. I can't believe Bilal Muhammad didn't fall and get knocked out in that fight. So boxing with Geoff Neal causes some serious problems, and I think we have a really good fight in our hands, and I think we have a really good tester for where Ian Garry stands in this division. What do you guys make of how this fight is going to play out? Who do you guys think has the edge in this one? Jerry, lead us off with that.
I think you kind of just hinted at how this fight's going to go. It's going to be kept on the feet, and they're just going to bang. Ian Garry's going to try and use I don't know if he actually is the taller fighter. No, he is. Yeah, he's got a 4-inch height advantage, so I think he's going to try and use his long frame, especially his legs. I think he's going to try and use those kicks to keep a bit of distance and avoid those hands of steel. So I do think it's going to be kept on the feet, but I'm going to lean slightly towards the younger fighter, solely because I think Ian Garry is the UFC's kind of new toy in the middleweight division. I still think they want all the hype. There's all the talk of every time he wins, what's happening next. He wants this, and this. And I think they wouldn't have given him someone like this. I do think it's going to be a very tough fight, but I am taking Ian Garry. I'm giving him just a slight advantage, and I think he gets it done in the third round.
I think for right now, because I don't know, for all these, that's the other thing too. When you finally get good fights, I tend to be more 50-50 on the Tuesday before the fights on Saturday when they're good fights, because I think my slight edge might go to Geoff Neal, just for the reason of, like we were saying, this is the right step up in competition for him at this moment. However, and we keep talking about hands of steel, I don't think he's ever been in the ring yet or in the octagon yet with someone that has this type of power, and I would love to see how he reacts to getting it, because for sure Geoff Neal will put some combos on him and will connect at some point in this fight. I don't know, I don't have a specific of when I think this round's ending or anything, but you got to think his biggest win right now is against Neil Magny, who is, James's favorite fighter, I think I heard him say. No, but it's Neil Magny, not a lot of power left in those hands. and definitely a drawback in speed compared to what Geoff has too. So I think he can maybe get overwhelmed by Geoff. And I'm trying to think, for the most part too, I think Geoff now has a pretty good chin on him. I'm trying to think of when's the
Hamza
last
hit him
time.
pretty clean in that fight.
Yeah, and there was one before that too where I'm trying to think of someone got him too a little bit, but so yeah, I think not that I don't think Garry can get it done, especially with the kicking kicking game a little bit with Neal, but I think he might be surprised when he gets in the octagon by that level, that step up in level of competition.
Yeah, I really respect Ian Garry's ability to manage range, and I think that's what wins him this fight. I think he's going to do a good job of staying in the outside, and he usually comes in with smart game plans, and he usually doesn't like to take risks. There's a reason the Neal Magny fight was not finished, because he didn't want to take the risk of finishing the fight against Neal Magny. And now we're in here with Geoff Neal. The threat level is like, I couldn't even begin to describe how much more threatening of a fighter Geoff Neal is than Neal Magny. But like, I don't think he's going to take too much risk, and I think he's going to be very careful, and I think he's going to play on the outside a lot. And he's good at managing range, and he has good kicks. And they're in an opposite stance. Geoff Neal southpaw, Ian Garry orthodox, and usually that opposite stance matchup favors the southpaw. But Geoff Neal doesn't really throw kicks at all. He has a good head kick on him. Landed a nice head kick against.
He knocked out Mike Perry.
Yep, knocked out Mike Perry with the head kick too. So good head kick, but he doesn't really kick to the body. So that advantage I don't think is going to be as pronounced on the end. Meanwhile, you've got Ian Garry as a guy who kicks to all three levels with that back leg. So I think that opposite stance matchup is going to really help him, especially since he doesn't want to box. That said, if Ian Garry decides he's going to fight with his ego and wants to prove he's a better boxer than Geoff Neal, he could run into problems very, very quick. And it seems like once you run into problems with Geoff Neal, it kind of, starts to snowball and it starts to go downhill. And when guys are losing to Geoff Neal, he's losing to, this is getting bad. Oh, Geoff Neal's really beating up on him. There's kind of like a real snowball effect. Once he finds the pacing, the range, once he starts landing some shots, it gets bad quick. So I think Ian Garry wins this fight, but this is another one. You tell me Geoff Neal wins. I'm not really shocked. So I think Garry wins. He probably comes in with a really smart game plan and gets a win, but I'm not that confident in him winning this fight.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, because, I agree. I was worried about the kicking game, and especially you said great at managing distance. So that is the path to victory, too, I can see. But I've just seen, I would think after you coming off a fight with Shavkat, you were in there trading with him. I know he's not like the utmost pressure fighter, but kind of like you were saying, too, with when in that Luque fight, that once he just got going, he was eating up that distance and stuff, and was just really getting in that boxing range and stuff. So that's why I could see the kicking game and Garry keeping his distance. But if there is a couple opportunities, say once or twice in a round, to where Neal can get in there and eat up that range and then get the combos going, and Garry feels his power, I think like you said, when they start to drown eventually. And so I think he could be less and less distance in between each, what do you call it, back and forth or whatever. So that'd be the one way I think maybe Neal can, get going.
Yeah. I do see, I think Geoff Neal can win this fight. Just like I said earlier, I think Ian Garry is just too long and manages it too well.
And I don't hate a Neal pick at all, to be 100% honest. When this fight got booked, I bet Geoff Neal, and that was my initial reaction, and I changed my mind after I watched film. So now I'm kind of stuck. on the opposite side of what the pick is going to be, but it is what it is. That's the game you play when you pick early. But yeah, like for Geoff Neal to win this fight, I think that's very, very plausible. And like you said, if he all of a sudden is really in his face and is closing the distance, it's going to be a test for it's going to be a real test for Ian Garry. All right, this next fight is another fight that is an absolute banger. This is a championship level fight in terms of pure talent. Henry Cejudo, Merab Dvalishvili. This is great fight. What do you guys make of this one being on this card? And where's your anticipation level? I guess I've asked that for every single fight. What's your anticipation level? What do you make of this fight? Merab versus Henry. Anthony, you can go ahead and start us this time.
Yeah. So I'll keep it a little short. Real quick, this was when I said the last 3 fights of the card, I actually thought this was the third to last. So 4 is what I should have said earlier. It was literally just 4 stellar fights. But this one, I'm really excited. I respect seeing Henry in the octagon now. Maybe he rubbed me the wrong way and I was too new to the UFC a little bit when he was really in his heyday and he was the king. And then he was doing his whole king of cringe stuff. But now, truly, when I get to see him fight, I'm excited for it. I'm happy just to see him go out there. And then in Merab as the machine and just spams takedowns. But I'm curious just to see the pure wrestling on display here. And if Cejudo with his Olympic gold and all his accolades, just how the wrestling holds up between the two. And then I saw he switched camps too, so I'm interested to see how that works.
Yeah, I'm with you. That whole coach firing camp,
insane.
Whatever happened, and the way he did it apparently on video, it confuses me. I don't know. That's not a good look in my opinion. I don't think it's something that's going to benefit him because I think he now seems like he's doing it for clout more than anything. It's like, oh, look at this guy, I just fired him. Here it is on, what was it, James? You're saying UFC Countdown?
Yeah. It's on the,
Yeah, that's just not a good look. And I mean, I think he's going up against the best guy at 135. I don't care what's happened anywhere else, who the champion is. I think Merab is the best guy there. But he hasn't fought since fighting Petr Yan, and that was early last year? Yeah, March 2023. Did attempt 49 takedowns, so I think we know how this fight's going to go. I think it's going to spend most of the time of Merab or even Henry because he's, as like you said, gold medal wrestler in his own right. This is going to be on the ground. If either one gets a knockout, I think I'd be very shocked. I think this probably goes the decision as well because they're both such strong grapplers offensively and defensively. Now this is going to just be an interesting fight. I'm excited for it because I'm excited to see one where Henry is after the Aljo fight. He was going to have another fight, pulled out injured. Now we're here. I'm curious to see what happens. And then as far as Merab goes, same thing of how he's been out for a while. And I still think he wins this. He fights the winner of Cheeto and O'Malley at 299, and I think he beats them if he is to get past Henry first.
Mm-hmm. This fight is Merab is not a guy that I have been high on. And I think this is one of my flaws is predicting fights, picking fights, evaluating fighters, however you want to describe it. I've struggled with guys that are not as skilled but make up for it in other physical areas. Just du Plessis is a guy that I didn't really have a lot of faith on winning a lot of his fights up to the title because I did not think he was as skilled. Was I right or wrong? Probably wrong. But with Merab Dvalishvili, I find myself in the same position of I don't really love some of these skills that he has going on. But the cardio just absolutely elevates him to another level. The ability to shoot 49 takedowns in a 5-round fight while landing over 100 significant strikes is absolutely bananas. Should not be able to happen. Those pure numbers are just ridiculous. But what I struggle with is he landed 11 or 12 takedowns of the 49. It's like that's where I come in and I struggle. And I think his wrestling gets sloppy at times. I think he wrestles out of position because he's so go, 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 go. I think he puts himself in bad positions with his hands because he's so go, go. I'm pressuring. I'm forward action. But at the same time, he's a hard guy to beat. That's a hard style to fight. I do think Henry does two things well. Obviously, that could cause problems here. Obviously, great grappler, number one. But number two, he doesn't shell up with a high guard. He's a guy with the karate stance and is going to move and create angles. When you look at Piotr Jan, in hindsight, that was a really easy matchup for Merab because a lot of his defense is high guard, so he can counter. But that just lets you get a free shot at the hips for a takedown. And then when you're mixing in takedowns and wrestling, now your hands are going up and down, and you completely lose your defense because Merab is manipulating where you put your hands defensively. In this matchup, I don't think that's going to be a problem. At the same time, you shoot 49 takedowns, it doesn't matter. So I'm picking Merab, but I do think Henry can win this fight if he offensively wrestles. If Henry decides, I'm going to out-wrestle you, I'm going to put you on your back, I'm going to put you up against the cage, you can stop a lot of the offensive weapons coming back your way, and you can limit the output. Will that be the game plan? I don't know. And I don't think that you should pick someone who, if he does this one particular thing, he can win this fight. Usually that one particular thing that you talked yourself into winning them the fight, that doesn't happen because that's not their game plan. So I'm taking Merab, but once again, Henry Cejudo wins. I'm not surprised. If he does, I think he has to offensively wrestle the guy who's going to try and wrestle him.
Yeah, and that is something that we've seen Merab lose from before. The only time he's ever been finished was Ricky Simon submitted him. Sure, that was 2018, but still kind of slacked on his ground game, got put in a guillotine, and was lights out for him.
Mm-hmm. I think, and like you're saying, that's why I think it's not, I don't want to say it's a bad matchup for him, but yeah, I think that Henry Cejudo, as weird as it sounds, like compared to some of those other people in that division, was just honestly maybe one of the poorer matchups for Merab to get to, which is funny for someone that is that highly ranked, and then a lot of people think he can beat 3 or 4 people, around his number. But I think this will definitely be one. I would hope so for the wrestling wise, which is maybe one of the low lights in the sense of entertainment value of sports. I think this, or for the UFC, I meant. But I think hopefully this should be a good wrestling display where you can even get more novice and casual fans to at least be able to enjoy all the position changes and the scrambles and the different types of takedowns between each of them, if they however many they try.
Mm-hmm. I think the pace is going to be fast, one way or another. One other thing real quick, Henry, I think, may be live for a knockout here. If he really sits down on a counter shot, I think he could land a knockout, not necessarily my prediction. And I'll probably change my prediction 8 times before I post our article on Friday. So I'm probably going to be going back and forth in this one, but I do lean Merab.
I think you knocked off some of that ring rust too. I wanted to say,
yes,
that's a great point.
It's tough watching the Aljamain fight and not thinking if Henry was more active fighting that he might not have won that fight. So
I don't know how similar. Obviously, they're 2 completely different fighters, but he's fighting Aljo's teammate in his second fight, so there's something there of you going against the same coach. Just that mentality in the back there for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great.
Something for Aljo to give Merab too as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's as we were saying, what was it? It was weird, the Paulo Costa fight. This one is so confusing to me because I can see so many different things happening.
A lot of moving parts, age, teammates, gyms, that all throw wrenches in any idea of what's going to happen in a fight.
That's why we love the sport, though. You never know.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
That's why we love good cards.
That's for sure.
Last fight on the main card, Roman Kopylov and Anthony Hernandez. I'll start us off here. I really like Anthony Hernandez here. Anthony Hernandez is a guy that his grappling legit. He's like a middleweight version of Merab, not the takedown pace, but grappling pace. He's a lot more transition based. So there's a lot of action once it gets to the ground. And middleweights tire out a lot quicker than bantamweights. So I really like Anthony Hernandez in that regard. Very legit submissions. Kopylov is a legit striker. Knockout power, some really quick kicks, quick hands. I think this is a fun fight. But I do think Kopylov showed some problems in the grappling in some of his UFC fights, and now you're fighting Anthony Hernandez. I got to go with Hernandez here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna ultimately pick Kopylov because I do think his stand up is that strong, and I really started enjoying watching him back the fight before he had that head kick. It was like a body kick, and then he finished him on the ground. I just think he's a fun fighter to watch, but I completely agree with you. He is very susceptible to being taken down and finished. That is the only way he was finished was what Carl Roberts, I think, submitted him in his UFC debut.
Yep.
And that was it. His first 2 UFC fights, he lost both of them. Since then, it's been 4 straight knockouts, and 3 of those 4 have been out cold. Not even TKOs, just pure knockouts. So I think he has the advantage on the feet, and I think he'll get on him slightly early if he can avoid the takedown.
Yeah, Kopylov is 4 on a 4 KO streak right now. So that striking is there. Fluffy in his own right is on a 4 just win streak mixed. I think mixed in with some decisions or 2 subs maybe. The person he did lose to was Holland before that. So I mean, elite strikers depends where you think Kopylov's striking is. I think fair to say, maybe not Holland elite striker, but definitely his striking is a problem for most of the people he faces and stuff. So it is kind of that striker versus grappling a little bit. I think I would err on the side of giving it to Fluffy, but 4 finishes in a row is something, that is something right there. So that's someone that knows how to end a fight, not only stun someone, but then end the fight and not have to worry about anything else. But I think I'm still, as of right now, I'm going to ride with Fluffy.
All right.
We still have what, 4 days, 5 days before the
exactly. I'll actually come up. Yeah, I'll come up with picks for the other fights.
Oh, this whole fight card, I can't wait.
It's
an entire week.
Yeah, it's a great card, and I said that earlier with the Merab and Henry fight. I've probably gone back and forth on it 6 times in my head already, one guy to the other. Probably was only going to keep happening as the week goes on. Haven't even seen the press conferences or the weigh-ins, so a lot to go on before we post the previews at the end of the week. As usual, final thoughts on the card. Can be the main event. It can be the first fight of the night. But what are some things that stand out to you guys on the rest of this card? Anthony, we can send it your way first.
Okay, stand out on this card. Let's see. I've seen Miranda Maverick very early on the prelims. That stands out to me. I also like Lemos' last fight was against who?
Wei
Lee, right? So she's finally back in there. So I look to her. Mackenzie Dern in herself too, very skilled. But it's good to see Lemos back because I think unfortunately no one's just quite on Wei Lee's level. But I think she was up there for top fighters in that class before that. But I don't know. Ultimately, I guess we'll just focus on the main card for me when it's that good. I'll just say I'm excited to see Whittaker back out there, and hopefully I'm seeing the younger one that just had a slip up, or not even younger one, just that's the same Rob that just had a slip up last fight, and he gets that going. And then this is the first time in a while where Volk in his own division truly might lose. Like it could go either way, which is also exciting for the featherweight division.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the fight it's not a specific. Usually, I have a specific fighter I'm excited for. The fight that is curious to me is the second of the actual prelims, not the early prelims. Rinya Nakamura and Carlos Vera. Nakamura's 8-0. He's won his first 2 UFC fights. One of them was that road to the UFC, so I don't know how that really counts in terms of UFC record. Otherwise, on the other side, Carlos Vera is making his UFC debut after, I think he lost to Brad Katona on The Ultimate Fighter, I want to say. So in that last season, so it's some guy making his UFC debut against a guy who has 1, maybe 2 technically UFC fights. Bantamweight division's already fun. These 2 guys could add some more spice to it.
Yep. I like Rinya Nakamura a lot. I wrote a post about him earlier, so high hopes for Rinya Nakamura. So really excited to see him. A lot of potential there. We'll see how it pans out in the octagon. Main card outstanding. I'm excited for every single fight, and 4 of the 5 fights, not to take anything away from Hernandez and Kopylov, but the other 4 are all like fights that are like top tier fight for the UFC. So 4 sensational fights, some of the best fights you can make. So I'm really excited. Press conference should be entertaining. And one prelim that I will shout out that we have not discussed yet, Danny Barlow. This was I mentioned last week, Oki and Prates were 2 guys who were near the top of my Dana White Contender Series rankings coming in off last season. Barlow was number 1. Maybe a bit aggressive there on Barlow, but he's a guy that I'm really excited to see in the UFC. Really impressed with his Contender Series fight, so I'm excited to see his debut against another guy that is a relatively tough opponent for a debut. Nothing crazy, but they didn't give him a absolute bomb to go knock out in his first fight. So it's going to be it's a decent test for a guy making his debut. So those are my closing thoughts. And then just to wrap us up here, we'll be back next week breaking down this card. And it sounds like the UFC 300 main event will be announced by next week. So next week we have UFC 300 in this card breakdowns. And like we talked about for today, 5 fights took us an hour. I imagine next week, the breakdown of these fights. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts in some of these divisions. There's going to be a lot to talk about next week. Tossing UFC 300 on top of it. Next week should be a good episode. A lot of fun talking points in the sport. So
just want to say we also have the UFC Mexico City card.
Yes.
So
it's actually a good card.
This might be like an hour-and-a-half episode next week. So be prepared for it.
Yeah, we're gonna struggle to fit everything in for that episode. So last things, probably some UFC posts. I'll probably get to a couple this week. VendorSportsMedia.com. Preview is the biggest UFC post that goes out every week. That will be out on Friday, and it'll have my in-depth written opinions on skills and things like that, and everyone's final prediction. Garrett as well will have his prediction in there. So make sure you check that out, VendettaSportsMedia.com. If you're this deep in the podcast, you should probably read that as well, because will probably like that. So, all right, enough rambling. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We'll catch you next week.